This video was originally recorded on Patreon. If you want access to exclusive code samples, videos 10 months before everybody else, and the ability to message me privately, check out the links in the description below. Welcome back to another Patreon episode, and in today's episode I'm going to show you how you can release your first app onto the Google Play Store. So first thing we need to make an app, and this is the app that we're going to recreate. So this is a really simple game that I've thrown together, and you literally have to try and get as many knives into the hay bale as possible, and if you get 2 knives in the same place, all the knives fall, the game restarts and you go again. We've also got a high score system that actually saves your score, so if I was to close this and go back onto this, my high score will still be saved every time I go onto it. So let's get started. So I'm in a blank construct, and the first thing we need to do is get this ready for a mobile phone layout. And that's really easy to do because the standard mobile phone layout is actually the same size as our viewport width at the moment, which is 854 by 480. Now if you want this to be a landscape game, you just swap those 2 numbers over, but the aspect ratio that you're looking for is a 16:9. So ours is going to be horizontal, so all we're going to do is go to the size and just type 854 by 480 because there is no camera scroll for this particular game. The other thing we can do is go to view, and we can see that orientation, we can make sure it is set to landscape. If you're making a game that's portrait, you can set it to be portrait when it loads up by default. Next, let's start with the basics. We're going to right click and insert a new object, and we'll go down until we see the word sprite, and we'll just start with our background to begin with. Now all the assets that I've used in my tutorial I'll put in the description as well, so you can try them out for yourselves if you want to follow along with mine, but you can obviously add your own theme to this as well. So this is my background. Now I've resized my background to be 854 by 480. If you're using my assets, this will be already set up for you, and this just means that when we press X and put it in, it is already the right size. Now we can either put this on its own layer and lock it, or you can just right click and just lock this selection, and that just means we can't click on it anymore and it's not going to get in our way. Next, let's move on to the marker before we put the hay bale in. So we're going to right click our new object, go on sprite, and the marker is the triangle that spins around the screen. So again, create your own version of this, or use the one provided, and then just hit the blue X to put it in. Now we're going to resize this quite a bit to make it quite small. It doesn't need to be very big at all. And then we want to center it in the middle of the screen. Now the easiest way to center it is just go to the position, and we know that it's 854, so we can just divide that by 2. And then for the Y, we just need to do 480 divided by 2. Again, if we don't do that calculation in our heads, we can just do it straight into the construct side, and there we go. There's our marker in the middle. And now we're going to add on its behaviors, and it only needs one behavior, and the behavior we're going to make use of is the orbit behavior. So we go over and we find orbit, there it is, and we're just going to set the radius to be 200 by 200. Again, we're just going to preview this just to make sure that's about right, and that looks good to me. We could change the speed as well if you want this to be slightly faster or slightly slower. Personally, I think 180 works pretty well for this, so I'm going to leave it at 180. Final thing you need to do in your marker is just make sure it is facing downwards, because if you're not facing downwards, then the triangle faces outwards or to the side. So again, just go into the editor, and if yours is facing the wrong way, just face it downwards like this. Next, we'll move on to the hay bale. So we're just going to insert a new object, scroll down to sprite, and we'll get our hay. Again, you can use any object for this. Once you've put your hay bale in forever, once you put whatever objects you've chosen, however, you do need to try and get a rough sort of collision shape together. Take your time with this because, again, this is a big part of your game. You can also right-click and get it to guess the polygon shape. It's pretty good, but for some weirder shapes, it might struggle. So, again, you might want to tweak it after. But to be honest, I'm quite happy with this, and this worked quite well in my testing. Once you've got your hay bale in, it needs to go into the center again. So, again, use the trick we did before. So, 854 divided by 2, and then 480 divided by 2. Just to center that, and we need this to go behind our marker. Now you can do this by using Z order, send to the bottom layer, but then you've got to send your background to the bottom layer as well, so it can be a bit of a mess. Personally, you can just open the Z order bar, and you can just actually rearrange objects like that. Makes life much easier. So there we go, there's our hay bale in the middle, and now if we hit play on this, this is where we're currently at. So really good at the moment. So let's move on to the next bit. So next we're going to introduce our knife. So we're going to insert a new object, scroll down again to sprite, and As always, you can change this to be whatever object that you want. Most important thing with your knife is actually the hitbox. This is the most important hitbox in the entire game, because again, if it's too big, it's going to feel a bit unfair to the player. So I like to make this fairly small and a little bit symmetrical, give the player a little bit of extra room, because what I want is I want my players to feel amazing when they get two knives in between a very small gap, as opposed to the player feel annoyed with the game because actually knives fell off when they didn't think it should have. So always try and give hitboxes to the player's end and let the player off a little bit. They'll feel like they enjoy the game a lot more and the game's not against them. And second bit is just your image point. Again, just to make sure it's roughly centered. And then just hit the blue X. Now this first knife, what we need to do is get it the size that we want. And this is the bit that's really important, because again, if your knife's too big, you can't fit as many around the screen. So I'm going to go for about that. Once you're happy, just put it on the top right of the screen, just out of bounds. We can then add our behaviors. Now we need a few behaviors for our knife. So the first one that we're going to add is the bullet behavior. And on the bullet behavior, we're going to up the speed to 800. Everything else can stay exactly the same. This just makes it feel quite fast-paced as a game. If it's too slow, when you hit the touch screen to fire your knife, it feels like it's lagging behind a little bit. Second behavior that we need is the physics behavior. Now this is what creates that little effect at the end where the game sort of resets when you fail. So we're going to turn that on, but we are going to set it to be enabled off. So it's not on straight away, and we're only going to trigger it when you make a mistake, and then we'll trigger all of them at the same time, and they'll all fall off the screen, ready for a restart. So final object that we need just to get started with the first bit is just the touch. So we can go down and add the touch object. This just gives us access to basic stuff with a touchscreen. So go to event sheet, add a new event, and we're going to go to touch. And the first thing I'm going to add is on tap. So this is when you tap the screen. Now, when I was playing around with this, if you tap the screen really fast, it registers as a double tap, which is treated differently in Construct, which means that you feel like the fire rate's really slow. So to fix this, we're just going to right click on this green arrow, make it an all block, and then add another condition, touch, and then on double tap. And this feels much nicer because if you tap it once, you still fire a knife. If you double tap it, you still fire a knife. And if you spam tap it, you still fire lots and lots of knives. So what action do we want to add? So for now, what we're going to do is we're just going to go to marker, scroll down, and we want to spawn another object. And the object that we want is the knife. Now currently we're spawning this from image point 0. I personally like to do from image point 1, and then just on my marker, just add a second image point. So we can go to the image point on the right here, right click, add a new image point, and just put it at the bottom. And then it feels like the knife is coming out the bottom instead of out the middle. Now after you spawn a knife, we're just going to add an action to the knife, and we want to set angle towards position. And what we're going to do is do hey.x and hey.y. So that's the first step. Next we're going to add a new event, and we're going to say knife on collision with another object, and then our hay bale. Now if you're a bit confused about on collision versus is overlapping, on collision only triggers once. Overlapping can trigger multiple times. So we just want to check the first time the knife touches the hay bale. And the simple thing we're going to do is take our knife, scroll down, and set the speed of it to 0. This just causes it to just stick into the hay bale and not do anything else. Then we're going to add one more event, and we're going to say if knife on collision with another object, and this time we're going to check if the knife is on collision with itself, so another knife. And the first thing we're going to do is take our knife, and we're actually going to turn on the physics behavior. So just scroll down, and for our physics option we should have set enabled. There it is. And we're going to make sure that's now enabled. We're then going to add a blank sub event, and on that event we're going to go to system, and there's this great option called pick all. So currently when we're talking about the knives, we're talking about just the two that collide with each other. Now we want to actually pick every single knife. Now the first thing I like to do is just add in a small wait of 0.5 seconds. That way we can see the two knives that hit each other first, and we know that's why we messed up, and then all the knives fall half a second after. Without this wait, you kind of get a bit confused about which knife hit which Why with the way it's really clear of going, oh, those two knives hit each other, and now the rest of them fell. So now we can add the action where we can now take the knife, and again we're selecting all of the knives now, and we can just put that set enabled on for the rest of them. Finally, we're going to add one more action. This is going to be a system. We're going to wait 2 seconds for all the knives to fall off the screen, and then we'll just destroy all the knives. That way we've not got loads and loads of assets on the screen that are lagging up the game. So we've now got the bare bones of a game, but there is some issues. So if I hit 2 knives, which I'm struggling to do right now, there we go. I can still find knives after. You can see we get this weird effect where they just keep disappearing. Now eventually will fix itself, but it's after quite a while. And again, this feels a bit weird and strange. So let's see why it's happening and how we can fix it. So the main issue that we've got is we're checking if a knife touches a knife. And as all the knives are falling, they're all touching each other, which means they're re-triggering all of this code again. Which means when the final 2 knives hit each other, we're still waiting for 0.5 seconds, then another 2 seconds, before all the knives are destroyed, before the game actually resets. So we want to fix this. So the easy way to do this is just add a global variable called resetting, and it's going to be a boolean, and by default it's going to be set to false. Next what we're going to do is just click on event number 1 and add in a blank sub event, and we're just going to do system is boolean set and resetting, and right click to invert this. We can then take our 2 bits of code here and just bring them down to this new action. Now what we're saying is if you tap or double tap, and as long as the game is not in reset mode, then fire as many knives as you want. Next what we're going to do is the moment that you collide with another knife, we're going to change that. So we're going to set boolean resetting is now true. Now because we only want this action to happen once, we're just going to add another condition here, and we're going to go to our system is boolean set resetting, and again just invert this to say if it's not resetting. So this will only check it once. As soon as it turns to true, then we will no longer check for a knife colliding with another knife. Finally, once all the knives are destroyed, we can add one more action, and we can now set the value or set the boolean of resetting back to false, and the game starts again. So now we've got a system in place that will actually restart our game, but will not cause any bugs either. So now that's in place, let's add a scoreboard. So for the scoring, we're going to split scoring into 3 parts. We'll start with the main one first. What's our score for the round? So I'm just going to call this score text. Click, and I'm going to make this the size of my hay bale. And this is going to be on the center of our hay bale. I want this to be front and center because this is the main point of the game. In terms of size, I'm going to go for about 30. Change the font, make it a little bit more exciting. So even if we go for something basic such as cursive, it'll look much better than Arial. And then all we're going to do is do a center alignment on the horizontal and a center alignment for the vertical, and set the default text to 0. The other 2 scores that we want is going to be the last score. So after you reset the game, you can have a little score at the top that tells you what your last score was on the last round. Just helpful because the game resets. We don't want to mess about ages showing their score. We just want something they can just look at and just go, oh, my last score was this. Again, take the time to just up the font size and put it in something a bit more exciting than Arial. I'm going to stick with just cursive. There we go. And then the final thing we want is actually the high score, which we're actually going to program to store and save when the app closes. So high score text, and again we're going to work that in the opposite corner. Change the text to what you want it to be. So in this case, high score is going to start at 0, font size 18, and again change it from Arial. So we've got that set up now. Obviously none of these bits of text do anything yet because we've not programmed that in, so let's do that now. So first thing we need is we actually need 3 global variables. So first one is going to be score, then last score, and then high score. Now we're going to start by adding the score. Now this happens when a knife touches a hay bale, but we're going to do one more check for this. We're just going to add a blank sub event, And all we're going to do for this one is we're just going to do exactly the same thing as before. Is just check if that Boolean set of resetting and just invert this. If we don't put this resetting in, when all the knives fall, if they do come in contact with the hay bale, then it adds to your score. And what you end up with is a score of 7 and an empty hay bale, and then you can just add to that score. So it leads to some really broken strategies, and we don't want that. So we're going to add a new action here. System, add to score by 1. Once we've added to the score, we obviously need to change the text. So score text, scroll down, set text, and this is going to be score. Next, we're going to go back to this pick all knives code, and this bit of code is a little bit messy, but it does the job. We're going to add an action to the bottom, and then we're going to move it into the right place. So we're going to go to system, set value of last score, and this is going to be score. So we're going to scroll this up, and we'll put this after 0.5 seconds. So you get 0.5 seconds to see it, and then it will get moved to the top there. We're also going to then take the last score text and change that. So we're going to set text, and this is going to be last score, and then use the and sign and then write last score. And again, we're just going to move that up just below when we change the last score. Finally, we're going to go to system, set value of score, and we're going to set that to 0. And just like before, we need to set the text for that as well. So score text, scroll down, set text to score. And again, put that when you change it to 0. So now we've got a proper reset system in place. We can now see our score, and we can see what the last score that we got. We should also check for high score at this point. So we can just add an event, system, compare variable, and we just want to check the last score and see at any point if it's greater than the high score. If it is, then we can just set the high score to whatever your last score was. So set value of high score to last score. And obviously we need to update the high score text. So we're just going to scroll down, set text, high score, and again, put that and sign in, and high score. Let's do a test. So now if we click, we can see our values going in. If we lose and reset the game, there you go, the game resets. Our high score is now in place. We can try and beat our high score, which we have done. Did very well on that one. And the game restarts again. You can see our last score in the top. And if we get a really bad score, I'm going to try and get a really bad score. I'm not doing very well at that. You can see the high score doesn't update and it goes back to 0. We've also now got protection of actually being able to throw any more knives. Hopefully you can hear me spamming the keyboard to actually stop people sort of abusing the game a bit more. So where do we go now? Well, this game's pretty good as it is, but I'm going to add 2 features that really elevate a game like this much further. First one is save states. So we're going to right click, insert a new object, and we're going to go on to local storage. Now the only thing I'm going to save is the high score. You can save the last score, so if you close the app you can see how you performed last time. I personally don't think that's needed, but again, that's something you can add. Very easy to do. So what we're going to do is, if we ever beat the high score, we're going to add an action. We're going to go to local storage, set value, and first of all we need a key. So I'm just going to call this HS, keep it really simple, high score. And then the value we want to save is actually high score. On the other side we need to add an event, system, scroll down to on start of layout. And then what we're going to do for on start of layout is we're going to try and get that value from local storage. So get item, the key is going to be HS, and then we just add an event underneath, local storage, and then on item get, and again we check for the key. So when we've got HS from local storage, we can then go to system, set the value of high score, and for this what we're going to do is use local storage dot item value. So this would be the last item that we've retrieved. And then just as always, we just need to set the high score text. So set text, high score, and then the and sign to get the high score back. So that's almost done. However, there is one problem with this, and we can see this if we run this. We get this high score NaN. Now, NaN in construct just means not a number, and we're getting this error because there isn't actually a high score saved. So it's getting an error when it's trying to load one up. So what we want to do is just add one more condition to this, and we can go to local storage, compare value, and what we're going to do is we're going to see if it is greater than 0. Just as simple as that. Now if we run it again, you'll see our high score is at 0. It never actually changed from what it was originally. Now if we try and get a high score really quickly, there we go, high score of 19. We can close down construct now. Load our game back up, and our high score is 19. So it is now saving it, but again, the first time people load up your app, if you've not got that check in place, they will get an error because again, there's no current high score data. So the second thing we want to add to really polish our game up is actually some sound. So on the object types, we're just going to add a new object, scroll down, and we're going to go to audio, add that as an object, and then we also need to import some audio. Now again, I've put in my assets that I'm using today in the description, so if you want to try the same assets I've got, but also feel free to put your own in. So first we'll go to the sound folder, import sounds, and put in a sound effect. So I'm using one for knife throw and one for when a knife touches another knife. Obviously you can add additional sounds as well. And then I'm also going to go to the music folder, import music, and I'm using Miniature Saloon, which comes from Zane Little Music on OpenGameArt. So it's an alright track for this. I would say there's probably ones you can find that are better, but for a quick look, this is pretty good. So now where do we put our sound effects in? So let's start with throwing a knife. So when we spawn a new knife, we can just add an action, audio, play, and then knife throw. So it's not looping. You can mess about with the volume if it's not right, but I'm going to leave mine at 0. And then the other one we want to do if a knife touches another knife. This is going to happen just on this side here. So I'm just going to go to audio, play, drop metal thing, looping no, volume 0. And then finally on start of layout, we're going to start our music. Now what's really nice about this is when you try and put music into audio and you want it playing throughout the background, the moment you restart layout, it restarts the audio. And there's ways to fix this, but it's very annoying. Our game doesn't actually ever reset, not by resetting layout. So we can actually just play this audio all the way through. We can set it to loop, and again, there'll be no cuts or breaks in it whatsoever. So Miniature Saloon, looping, yes, and done. So that's our audio setup as well. At this point, we've got a working game. We can stop here, but let's do one more change to it to make it ready for an app. So we're going to go to the right side, and you've got this pack called icons. And this contains all the different possible icons we can have when we export to different platforms, such as an app. So what we need to do is change all of these to be something to do with our theme. And then that way, when we actually download as an app, instead of having the construct icon, we can have our own custom icon. Now, before you do this and change any of these, I do recommend you create a save of this, because last time I went to go onto these icons, it crashed. It doesn't happen very often, but there is a chance. So save before you go any further, please. Once you're ready, find the biggest one, which is icon 512, right click and hit edit. So I've imported my logo in here. The biggest thing is that you do need to make sure the size is 512, 512. So you can stretch this out to make it bigger if it's not. But again, this is the largest app icon. So if you're using a tablet, maybe it might recommend this icon. So again, get it the best you can. And then once you're done with that, save it and then hit the blue X. Then we'll go down to the next smallest icon, which is 256. So edit. You can bring in the same icon, but again, what you need to do then is resize it. So 256 to 256. Make sure you're on stretch and press OK. I'm going to keep repeating this for all of the different sizes. Now I'm currently on the 64 by 64 icon. And as you can see, we're starting to get to the stage now where we get quite a blurry icon. So again, you might need to touch up each of these icons. You might decide when you get to the smaller icons, actually changing completely what you use as your sprite. So for one of my games, Marshmallow Jump, I actually had the background with the marshmallow flying into the screen. By the time I got to this sort of size, I just had the marshmallow. That was it. That was the whole icon, was just a picture of a marshmallow instead of it flying onto the screen, because I didn't have room to get that detail in. So I'm going to leave mine as a blurry mess because I'm not planning on releasing this one. I'm going to give you the opportunity to do that. But again, if you want to touch these icons up, you can. If you want to change the icon, again, you can as well. And here's our lovely 16 by 16. Now, I'm not sure which devices would actually use a sprite this size, but we'll put it in just to be safe, because we'd rather that than people having the awful Construct logo. Nothing wrong with the Construct logo, of course, but it doesn't look professional when you're using default stuff. For the load and logo, this one's just the same. This one is 64 by 64. So again, just change that. So when you get the Construct loading screen, it should replace it with your icon instead. Not a bad thing to let people know that you are using Construct. It's a great engine, more people should be using it. But again, you might want to put your own logo in as well. Now, before we look at getting this onto a device, we just need to make sure that it is app ready. There's a couple of things that Construct requires of you before you're able to do that. So just go to Project Properties, and at the top here, I've done this already because I've had a couple of issues getting this working. But first of all, change the name of it if you haven't done so already. Version can stay at 1.0. Description must be there. If you don't have a description, it will not let you export. You also need an ID. Now with the ID, it is com.studio and then whatever the name of your app is. So for me, com and then Riley Studios. Doesn't matter if you're not part of a studio, this is your first app, just call it something. Again, it is just an ID of some sort and then the name of the game. This just means when you upload it to the Play Store, they can actually sort by IDs. So again, this needs to be unique. Also needs to be all lowercase as well, so you can't have uppercase letters in this. And then author, I'm not sure if you actually need author, but put it in anyway. And then if you want to add an email address and website, you can, but they are optional. So once you've done that, we can go to Menu, Project, and then Export. And then what we've got is Android and iOS. iOS I've never tried using before because I don't have an iPhone. Also, if you want to put apps onto the App Store, it is £100 a year to do so. And if you don't pay that £100, any apps that you've got get taken off there. So it's quite strict. Android, it's a one-time fee of £25. So we'll go for Android today because that's what I'm set up for. And again, if you're going to try this and go onto the Play Store, £25 is a lot more appealing than £100 a year. Now we get to this stage, we can just press next on this option for now. In terms of the build that we want, we're going to change the Android build to debug APK. Now the minimum version, again, this is not running anything fancy. We can go for 7.0. The reason we're running debug APK, this is one you can just download and run off your phone straight away, which means you can test it, you can run it off your own device, and if you want to stop this tutorial here, then that's absolutely fine, you can do that. It does take quite a few more steps to then move that onto the Play Store. So we're then going to go next, and this is the bit that takes a bit of time, and after waiting about a minute or two, you'll get this bit here. We're just going to do downloads, and now we've got an APK file, so we can send this to our phone via Google Drive or email, and we can actually download this on our own device. Once you've copied the file over to your phone, before you can actually install the app, you may need to go into your system settings, in security, and tick on the option that says unknown sources. This just means you can download apps that are outside of the Play Store. This is obviously put on for a security concern, so it's the risk of you might be downloading something that's a virus. Obviously, you know you've made it in Construct, it hasn't got virus on it. So when you also then go back to your downloads and install the app, it says this is from an unknown source, do you trust it? Click yes, install it, and it's now on your phone. Now, final step, I'm actually going to cheat a little bit. I was watching this video, which is how I actually learned to put my first app onto the Play Store, and there's a lot of steps to go from where we are at the moment to get it on the Play Store. It's lots of admin steps. Instead of me recording all of that just for the sake of it, I'm going to actually leave you a link to this channel. It's fantastic. Like I said, it was the one that helped me. As sort of a compromise for cheating you out of the last part of the video, making you go elsewhere, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to show you a clip from a flowchart program that I'm working on. So flowcharts are new features added to Construct. I'll also add a copy of the file. So it's a Skyrim project that allows you to navigate around the world. And it's a nice introduction to flowcharts. And then I will be doing a video for the main channel on that as well that you can watch. But that'll be the end of our Patreon episode. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.